Picture the most successful consultant in your department. You know exactly who I'm talking about.
Right. Everyone has that one person in mind immediately.
Exactly. They've got the beautiful, expansive house in the absolute perfect catchment area. They have the 2 premium cars sitting on the driveway, maybe, an orthopedic Porsche. And they are bringing in this top percentile income that, well, most of the population can scarcely fathom.
It looks completely flawless from the outside.
It does. But what if I told you that beneath that flawless veneer, they're likely one minor illness or maybe one unexpected tax bill away from total financial ruin?
Wow. Yeah, it's a sobering thought.
Today, we are opening the door on this quiet, pervasive kind of suffering that is remarkably common within the medical profession, and yet it is almost entirely absent from our professional discourse.
It's a very real, very hidden epidemic. I mean, the suffering is quiet precisely because those outward aesthetics of success are so firmly in place.
Right.
It feels deeply shameful, I think, for a clinician to earn in the top 1% globally, yet still feel this cold sweat of panic when, say, a temporary reduction in private clinical sessions occurs.
And that is exactly the core thesis of our deep dive today. Financial wellness is fundamentally a clinical well-being issue. It isn't just some, tertiary concern about money.
No, absolutely not.
It's not an optional hobby for people who like reading the Financial Times on a Sunday. It is the structural infrastructure that dictates your career sustainability. So today, we are going to completely reframe financial literacy for the medical profession.
Which is so desperately needed.
We're going to dissect the current financial landscape based on expert analysis, offering you a practical, judgment-free guide to the absolute basics that, well, no one ever taught you in medical school. Now, I should clearly state right at the top that this deep dive is strictly for general education. It doesn't constitute individual financial advice. But to help us systematically dissect the structural financial missteps physicians so predictably make, we are joined today by our expert. His analytical work focuses exactly on this intersection of clinical excellence and financial structure.
I'm very glad to be here. I mean, we really need to start applying the exact same rigorous, evidence-based diagnostic frameworks to our financial health that we apply every single day in the operating theater or the outpatient clinic.
Yes, exactly.
We don't guess with patient physiology, right? But we routinely, almost casually, guess with our own financial architecture.
Which is terrifying when you put it like that. I want to ask you, the listener, to hold a specific thought in your mind as we get into this. What is your personal ratio of income to lifestyle?
That's the golden question.
Don't worry about the raw numbers for a second. Just think about that ratio. Keep it front and center. Let's begin by examining the dual reality most doctors face the absolute second they finish training. You transition overnight from a fairly restrictive registrar's stipend to an exceptionally high earning potential.
Right, it's a massive jump.
But you carry with you an unusually high debt burden from years of training. Why is this specific combination so deceptively risky?
Well, the risk lies in a psychological phenomenon we can call the illusion of future abundance.
The illusion of future abundance. I like that.
Yeah, because when a clinician receives that first consultant contract, the absolute number on the paper is staggering compared to what they've survived on for the previous decade.
Oh, absolutely. It feels like you've won the lottery.
Exactly. And this sudden influx of capital acts as a profound psychological permission slip for deferred consumption. Think about it. You spent your 20s and early 30s sacrificing.
You missed your friends' weddings because you were on call.
Right. You drove a failing hatchback that barely made it to the hospital car park. You lived in subpar, damp housing. And suddenly the big income arrives, and it feels as though you have finally crossed the finish line.
Right, you feel like you've earned it. And the result is an immediate, aggressive upgrade in lifestyle. Suddenly it's the premium car and finance, the massive mortgage on the forever home, the luxury holidays just to, make up for lost time.
And the dangerous part is that each of these decisions feels entirely reasonable and well-deserved in isolation.
They do. You think, well, I work 80 hours a week, I deserve a nice car.
But they don't exist in isolation. They immediately lock up future cash flow. The psychological trap here is believing that the hard part is over, when in reality the financial consolidation phase is just beginning.
If we view this clinically, the financial state of the new consultant is remarkably similar to a patient presenting with asymptomatic but severe cardiovascular disease.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Right. Outwardly, the patient looks incredibly robust. They're functioning perfectly well, they look healthy, their color is fantastic, but internally, the structural integrity is heavily compromised.
The arteries are quietly occluding.
Yes. The arteries are quietly occluding. In financial terms, those reasonable-seeming purchases are the arterial plaques. They are quietly compounding, structurally committing your future income to servicing today's lifestyle before you've built any true equity or resilience.
Yes. And the silent occlusion in that scenario is the mechanics of the debt itself. Specifically, student loans and early career personal debt. New clinicians chronically underestimate the brutal mathematical reality of compounding interest working against them.
They really do. It's like we go blind to the math.
Let's break down the math. If you graduate with a massive student loan burden, and perhaps you've accumulated some credit card debt to survive those final exams or pay for expensive courses, you might be looking at an interest rate of 6, 7, or even 8%.
Which is huge over a large principal.
Right. But they look at a monthly minimum payment, they see that they can comfortably afford it from their shiny new gross salary, and they completely ignore the fact that the principal balance is barely moving.
So they're essentially just treading water.
Worse than treading water, actually. They are renting their current lifestyle from their own future hours worked. I mean, if you have 100,000 pounds in debt compounding at 7%, you are generating thousands of pounds in interest every year just to stand still.
Wow.
When you combine high monthly debt servicing with immediate large-scale lifestyle upgrades, you create a catastrophic cash flow trap. The high salary is instantly absorbed the moment it hits the account.
Leaving absolutely zero margin for the actual accumulation of wealth.
Exactly, zero margin.
If the sheer volume of our income creates a false sense of security, we have to look at what is actively eroding that income before it even reaches our current accounts. This brings us to the silent erosions.
Oh, this is where the real pain starts.
Let's dissect the massive disconnect between a physician's gross headline salary and their actual take-home pay, because this is where the panic usually sets in. We see the big 150,000 or 200,000 pound number on the contract, but the reality hitting the bank account is severely diminished.
It is often one of the most jarring realizations for a newly qualified senior clinician. That headline figure is subjected to immediate, severe attrition. Let's walk through it mechanically.
Please do.
First, you have high income taxation. The moment your income crosses certain thresholds, your marginal tax rate skyrockets. You start losing your personal tax allowance. That's the dreaded 60% tax trap that catches so many senior doctors in the UK.
Right, because between 100,000 and 125,000, you're effectively paying 60 pence on the pound.
Exactly. It's a brutal marginal rate. Then, as a medical professional, you are burdened with mandatory and quasi-mandatory deductions. You have your professional indemnification fees, which can be astronomical depending on your specialty.
I mean, if you're in obstetrics or private orthopedics, those fees are eye-watering.
Absolutely eye-watering. And then you have your general medical council fees, your Royal College memberships.
Not to mention the NHS pension contributions, which take a massive mandatory percentage right off the top.
Exactly. It can be 12, 13% depending on your tier. And on top of that, you absolutely must be paying for comprehensive income protection or disability insurance.
So by the time the capital actually becomes liquid and available for discretionary use to buy groceries or pay a mortgage, the physician is often managing a net figure that is 40 to 50% lower than their gross expectation.
Easily. It is a harsh reality check.
Which introduces the most insidious pathology in physician finance: lifestyle creep. You establish a lifestyle based on your gross number, but you are forced to fund it with the net.
Yes. That is the perfect way to phrase it.
Furthermore, every time that net increases slightly, maybe you take on an extra waiting list initiative or your private practice expands, the spending aggressively expands to meet it.
It always finds a way to be spent.
This leads to a critical mathematical reality that we really have to emphasize today. A physician earning 300,000 pounds with a 300,000 pound lifestyle is in the exact same financial peril as someone earning 50,000 pounds with a 50,000 pound lifestyle.
Yep. They are both one missed paycheck away from disaster.
The absolute number is totally irrelevant. The ratio is the only metric of survival.
The absolute number provides a facade of safety, right? But the ratio dictates your actual solvency. The psychology behind lifestyle expansion is deeply tied to our environment. As your income grows, your peer group shifts.
You move to a different neighborhood, your kids go to different schools.
Exactly. You suddenly find yourself in environments, private hospitals, highly affluent neighborhoods, where premium expenditures are completely normalized. Failing to establish an honest starting position dooms your ratio from the outset.
I have to ask, though, we are highly analytical professionals. We spend our days understanding incredibly complex biological systems, pharmacokinetics, and intricate surgical anatomy. Why is it that when it comes to personal capital, we suddenly believe our absolute income renders us immune to basic arithmetic?
Because basic arithmetic in this context requires massive ego suppression.
Ego suppression, wow.
Acknowledging the constraints of basic math means acknowledging that despite your decade of elite, grueling training, you still cannot afford everything simultaneously. It requires you to delay gratification once again, right at the exact moment you felt you would finally earn the right to stop delaying it.
That cognitive dissonance must be profound.
It is profound. It is much, much easier to lean on the absolute income figure as a protective shield than to undergo the rigorous restrictive discipline of actually managing a cash flow ratio. You assume you can just work harder to bridge the gap.
Just do another locum shift, pick up another clinic.
Right. But you cannot mathematically out-earn a one-to-one spending ratio. Every additional hour you work, every extra weekend on-call shift you take is immediately consumed by the lifestyle infrastructure you have built.
Since we can't simply out-earn poor lifestyle ratios, we have to look at the structural interventions required to fix them. And surprisingly, the most vital interventions are also the most unglamorous.
Very unglamorous. Boring even.
We need to completely dismantle the myth that investment picking, the selection of individual stocks or speculative assets, is the key to wealth.
Oh, the medical profession is utterly plagued by this misconception.
Yeah.
I mean, walk into any surgeon's lounge or consultant common room, and the financial discussions are almost inevitably centered around speculative investments.
Always. Someone is always pitching the next disruptive biotech stock.
Or a complex private equity vehicle, or the latest cryptocurrency run. This is a massive distraction. Those glamorous fixes carry almost no weight in your long-term financial survival. What actually carries weight are the boring, repetitive, structural decisions.
Let's use a clinical parallel here. We wouldn't attempt an experimental, complex, multi-stage surgical technique without first ensuring the patient's airway is secure.
Exactly. The basics first.
We make sure their hemodynamics are stable, and we have basic intravenous access. We rely on the ABCDEs. Stock picking and speculative investments are the experimental high-risk surgical techniques. The boring structural decisions, your savings rate, your tax efficiency, your disability insurance, those are the airway.
That's a perfect analogy.
If you lose the airway, the brilliance of your experimental surgery is completely irrelevant. The patient dies.
Securing the airway in finance begins with the savings rate. The percentage of your gross income that you systematically save and invest is the single largest determinant of your long-term outcome. Let's look at the mechanics of this.
Okay, let's break it down.
A clinician who commits to a 20% savings rate will achieve financial independence regardless of whether their investment returns are merely average. Conversely, a clinician with a 5% savings rate will fail, even if they possess the predictive foresight of a seasoned Wall Street hedge fund manager.
Because the base capital just isn't there.
Exactly. The volume of capital deployed vastly outweighs the marginal percentage points of yield you might chase with a hot stock.
And the second pillar of this airway management is tax efficiency. We are incredibly inefficient as a cohort regarding taxation, largely because we just don't understand the vehicles available to us.
Tax efficiency is about utilizing statutory retirement structures and tax-advantaged accounts in the strictly correct mathematical sequence.
So things like ISAs and pensions.
Yes. For example, understanding exactly how your ISA allowances work, how to navigate the complexities of pension tapering limits, which is a massive issue for senior doctors, and how to shield your investments legally from capital gains taxes.
The compounding effect of tax-free or tax-deferred growth over a 30-year career is staggering, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. Leading capital in highly taxed environments simply because you haven't bothered to optimize your structures is equivalent to chronic low-grade hemorrhaging. It is entirely preventable capital loss.
The third pillar, and perhaps the one that resonates most clinically, is insurance coverage. Specifically, framing a young physician's future earning capacity as their single most valuable asset.
It is their biggest asset by far.
If you calculate the lifetime earnings of a mid-30s specialist, you are looking at an asset worth anywhere from £3 to £6 million over the course of their career. Yet, the chronic underinsurance for disability puts this massive asset at catastrophic risk.
It is the ultimate failure of risk mitigation. I mean, think about it practically. You would never leave a £3 million commercial property completely uninsured against fire.
No, never. You'd be considered reckless.
Yet, physicians routinely leave their own multi-million-pound earning capacity totally exposed to illness or injury. A highly specialized own occupation income protection policy is the absolute bedrock of physician finance.
Without it, a single tremor in a surgeon's hand, a sudden visual deficit, or a chronic autoimmune condition completely annihilates the financial foundation.
You go from a top-tier earner to zero, literally overnight, and with all the liabilities of the top-tier lifestyle still attached.
Then we have the fourth pillar, estate basics. Wills, lasting powers of attorney, and updated beneficiaries. We see morbidity and mortality daily on the wards, yet we spectacularly fail to plan for our own.
We have a massive blind spot for it.
The cost of ignoring this is borne entirely by our family members at the absolute worst possible time.
It truly transitions from a simple financial error to a moral failure. Leaving an unprotected, unstructured estate guarantees that your grieving family will be subjected to protracted, expensive, and entirely avoidable legal distress just to access the capital they need to survive.
It's heartbreaking to see.
It is an administrative necessity that must be finalized the very moment your net worth turns positive or the moment you have dependents.
Finally, the fifth structural pillar, investment philosophy. This is where we return to the airway analogy. Why does a simple, low-cost, diversified, and consistently executed plan almost always beat the clever, complex alternatives that doctors love to talk about?
Because global markets are highly efficient mechanisms, and costs compound just as relentlessly as returns do.
Right.
Highly intelligent professionals like clinicians often suffer from a very specific intellectual hubris. Because they have mastered the immense complexities of human physiology, pathology, and procedural interventions, they incorrectly assume they can easily outsmart global financial markets.
We think, well, I can understand the Krebs cycle, I can surely understand the stock market.
Exactly. They attempt to get clever, seeking out high-fee, actively managed funds or obscure alternative investments, assuming their raw intellect will translate to higher yields.
But the data tells a completely different story.
The empirical data is overwhelming. Over a multi-decade horizon, a simple, globally diversified portfolio of low-cost index funds, contributed to consistently, regardless of what the market is doing, will outperform the vast majority of clever, actively managed strategies.
So keep it simple.
Keep it extremely simple. When you buy complex, actively managed funds, you are paying exorbitant fees for a manager to trade and beat the market, which they rarely do consistently. Complexity in investing usually serves only to enrich the entity selling the complex product while actively dragging down your net returns.
We know these pillars are the foundation of financial health. Yet, as a profession, we repeatedly ignore them. In fact, we tend to fall into highly predictable diagnostic categories of financial error.
We really do. It's almost pathological.
If we conceptualize these errors as clinical presentations, we can identify 6 distinct phenotypes of financial pathology. Let's systematically walk through them because recognizing your own phenotype is the first crucial step toward intervention.
Let's start with the first phenotype. We call this one the delayed starter. This is the clinician who finishes their exhaustive training so profoundly depleted, both physically and cognitively, that they simply cannot muster the bandwidth to plan.
I know so many people exactly like this.
Right. They just want to sleep, work their shifts, and recover.
Yeah.
So they put off engaging with their finances for 3, 5, or even 10 years post-training.
The tragedy here is the permanent loss of the most critical asset in compounding, which is time. Let's do the math on this, sort of explain it simply. If you start aggressively investing at age 30, the heavy lifting is done by the compounding interest over the next 30 years.
Your money makes money, and then that new money makes money.
Exactly. But if you delay starting until age 40, the mathematical effort required out of your own pocket to catch up is exponential. You have permanently lost the easiest growth years.
Exactly. A 10-year delay means you often have to save twice as much of your monthly income just to end up in the exact same place at age 60. It's a brutal penalty for procrastination.
And then we move to the second phenotype.
Yes, the second phenotype is the lifestyle matcher. This is an incredibly common sociodynamic issue, particularly in procedural specialties. This physician benchmarks their spending entirely against their peers within the same practice group or hospital department.
This creates a fascinating collective illusion. You look around the consultant's lounge, you see your colleague driving the new Range Rover, wearing the luxury watch, and you naturally assume they have unlocked some secret level of wealth.
You assume they know something you don't.
Right. You are completely unaware that they are financing everything to the hilt and sweating their monthly cash flow just as much as you are.
It creates a highly toxic feedback loop. An entire department can operate under a shared delusion of wealth, driving each other into deeper and deeper structural debt. They see outward displays of consumption and automatically equate them to underlying financial stability.
Which is so rarely the truth.
It is a house of cards built almost entirely on peer pressure. If the senior partner buys a boat, suddenly the junior partners feel they need a country club membership just to keep up appearances.
That brings us to the third phenotype, which I find particularly concerning: the complex product buyer. This is the clinician who has sold incredibly convoluted insurance products, inappropriate tax shelters, or opaque investment vehicles by misaligned advisors.
Yes, this is a dangerous one.
But wait, I have to push back here. We're talking about consultants who can memorize complex anatomical pathways and manage multi-system trauma in their sleep. Doctors aren't stupid.
No, of course not. They're brilliant.
Right. So if these complex life insurance products or tax shelter schemes are so mathematically terrible, why do so many incredibly smart surgeons buy them? Are you saying it's purely a scam, or is there some genuine tax benefit they're chasing that blinds them to the reality?
It's a great question. It's not necessarily a scam in the illegal sense, but it is deeply predatory targeting. Physicians are the absolute premier target demographic for misaligned financial products.
Because we have high cash flow but no time.
Precisely. You possess immense cash flow, minimal free time to scrutinize a 50-page legal contract, and, crucially, a deferential attitude towards perceived experts in other fields. The financial industry recognizes this perfectly.
They see us coming a mile away.
They absolutely do. They design products, like certain types of whole life insurance, dressed up as investments that are incredibly lucrative for the seller, generating massive upfront commissions. The pitch appeals directly to a doctor's ego and their desperate desire for tax avoidance.
The ego.
The salesperson will say, well, this is a proprietary strategy used by the ultra-wealthy to shield assets. And the physician buys it because of the prestige, without realizing they have just locked their capital into an illiquid structure with exorbitant hidden fees that mathematically underperforms a simple, boring index fund.
The desire for exclusivity and tangible assets also drives our fourth phenotype, the real estate speculator. This is the clinician seduced by the narrative that property investment is the ultimate sophisticated fast track to wealth.
Property is a huge obsession in the UK medical community.
Huge.
Real estate can absolutely be a viable asset class, but this phenotype enters it entirely blindly. They view it as passive income, wholly underestimating the brutal reality of the hidden costs.
They just see the rental income covering the mortgage and think it's pure profit.
Right. They don't factor in the maintenance, the void periods where the property sits empty, the tenant management issues, the tax implications of second properties, and the sheer illiquidity of the asset.
They don't price in the 2 a.m. phone call about a broken boiler when they are exhausted after a 14-hour shift.
Precisely. They introduce massive leverage, huge mortgages, and concentration risk into their lives. And when you adjust their returns for the time spent managing the property and the hidden carrying costs, they often severely underperform a simple, liquid, zero-hassle index strategy.
So they essentially buy themselves a stressful second job that they do not have the time or energy to do properly.
Exactly. It's a part-time job they pay for the privilege of having.
The fifth phenotype is the last-minute planner. This is the physician who wakes up at age 52, realizes their joints ache, they are emotionally exhausted from the clinical grind, they desperately want to reduce their hours, and they finally sit down to look at the mathematics of retirement.
And they discover that the math is brutally unforgiving at that late stage.
Because they miss the compounding window.
Yes. Without the massive leverage of time and compounding interest we discussed earlier, the required savings rate to fund a high-income retirement in a compressed 10-year window is staggering. It is often clinically impossible to achieve without drastic, painful lifestyle degradation.
They suddenly realize they can't afford to step back, and they are trapped.
Trapped by their own past inaction.
Finally, we have the avoider, the clinician paralyzed by the discomfort of it all. They refuse to open the bank statements, they do not know their actual net worth, they have no idea what their debt totals are, and they make purely emotional decisions because they lack any objective, factual framework.
Avoidance is an active decision. I always stress this. By doing nothing, you are actively choosing to let your finances degrade.
It's like ignoring a lump.
Exactly. It is perhaps the most destructive phenotype because it allows all the aforementioned silent erosions, the inflation, the interest compounding against them, the lifestyle creep to operate completely unchecked. Financial health, exactly like clinical health, degrades very rapidly in the dark.
Once a listener recognizes their own phenotype in this list, whether they are the lifestyle matcher sweating the car payments or the avoider hoarding unopened envelopes, the immediate instinct is to seek help.
Of course, it's human nature to want a quick fix once you realize there's a problem.
But as we've seen with the complex product pitches, seeking the wrong help is objectively worse than doing nothing at all. Prescribing the right advisory support requires extreme diligence. We must acknowledge that the vast majority of busy clinicians genuinely need a financial advisor, but we have to equip you with the critical questions required to vet them safely.
Selecting an advisor is exactly equivalent to selecting a specialist for a complex surgical procedure on a loved one. You wouldn't just pick the first name in a directory.
Never.
You would interrogate their credentials, their track record, and their methodology. The absolute first, non-negotiable question you must ask an advisor is the fiduciary question.
The fiduciary question.
You must ask them explicitly and get it in writing. Are you a fiduciary at all times for all the advice you provide me?
Let's pause on the word fiduciary, because it's one of those terms people nod at but don't really understand. To clarify for our listeners, it is the financial equivalent of our medical duty of care.
That's a perfect parallel.
It means they are legally and ethically bound to place your financial interests above their own or their firm's bottom line. The trap here is that some advisors are only fiduciary sometimes, depending on the specific product they are discussing.
That is the crucial distinction. If an advisor is dual registered, they might act as a fiduciary when managing your portfolio, but switch to a non-fiduciary sales role when pitching you an insurance policy.
Which is a massive conflict of interest.
If they cannot state in writing that they act as a fiduciary 100% of the time, the interview is over. Stand up and leave. The second critical inquiry regards the incentive structure. You must ask explicitly, how are you compensated and by whom?
You need to deeply understand the difference between fee-only advisors and commission-based advisors. Let's explain this simply as well. To a lot of doctors, paying a transparent fee out of pocket sounds worse than getting seemingly free advice from someone who earns a commission from the companies they recommend. Why is fee-only actually the safer bet?
Unpacking how an advisor is paid dictates the very nature of the advice you will receive. If an advisor is paid a commission for selling you a specific whole life insurance policy or an actively managed mutual fund, their financial incentive is heavily skewed towards selling you that specific product.
Regardless of whether a cheaper, simpler alternative exists, that would be better for you.
Exactly. Their livelihood depends on the sale. Fee-only advisors who charge you a flat retainer fee, an hourly rate, or a clear percentage of assets under management remove that specific conflict of interest.
They are paid by you and only by you.
Therefore, their incentive is aligned with growing your wealth, not generating sales commissions.
It is entirely about aligning incentives. Next, you must interrogate their investment philosophy. What are the red flags we should be listening for when they describe how they will manage our money?
Well, if their strategy involves market timing, claiming they know when to pull money out before a crash and put it back in before a rally, that is a massive red flag.
Because no one can reliably time the market.
No one. If they advocate for frequent trading to beat the index, or if their primary strategy is placing your capital into proprietary high-fee funds owned by their own parent firm, walk away. You are looking for a boring, evidence-based, low-cost, passive philosophy.
You also absolutely need to verify physician-specific expertise. A generalist advisor might be perfectly competent for a standard corporate employee, but medical professionals have highly idiosyncratic financial structures.
Extremely idiosyncratic. Your advisor must intimately understand the mechanics of medical partnership buy-ins. They need to understand the complex structures of public versus private student loan refinancing in the UK.
And the NHS pension, which is a minefield.
It's a complete minefield. The nuances of your specific malpractice indemnification and the highly unique statutory retirement accounts and pension tax traps specifically applicable to doctors. If they are learning these mechanics on your time, they are a liability to your financial health.
You should also demand transparency. Ask to see representative, anonymized client plans and long-term outcomes. If they cannot produce a clear, comprehensible roadmap of what they actually do, run.
Finally, you must establish firm boundaries from day one. What decisions remain explicitly yours, and what execution is delegated to the advisor.
I really want to highlight the psychological barrier here. Doctors often skip these rigorous questions during initial meetings to avoid feeling awkward or confrontational.
We hate feeling like we're interrogating someone.
We really do. We are so accustomed to being the ultimate authority in the room, the ones giving the diagnosis. Stepping into a sleek financial office flips that dynamic. It makes us feel vulnerable and out of our depth. So we revert to extreme politeness and just nod along.
It's a very natural human reaction, but a very expensive one.
We must reframe this immediately. That momentary social awkwardness of interrogating an advisor's fee structure is a microscopic price to pay compared to the devastating, multi-decade cost of a bad, misaligned advisory relationship.
You, the physician, must remain the ultimate architect of your well-being. You are delegating the execution of a plan and seeking specialized counsel, but you are never abdicating your responsibility.
You're still the boss.
Exactly. If an advisor makes you feel intellectually inferior, or if they obfuscate their answers with dense financial jargon to confuse you, they are failing you. Competent professionals clarify complex topics. They do not confuse.
As we draw this deep dive to a close, let's synthesize the overarching narrative we've built today. Financial clarity is not about accumulating wealth just for the sake of having a high score in a bank account.
No, not at all.
It directly translates to clinical flexibility, familial stability, and the complete elimination of that quiet, compounding stress we discussed at the very beginning of the show. Financial literacy is not an optional weekend hobby. It is the mandatory infrastructure required to maintain a sustainable, resilient medical career over decades.
If you do not control your capital, and the sheer lack thereof will eventually dictate your clinical decisions. It will force you to work extra weekends you do not want to work, in environments you do not wish to be in, long past the point of physical and emotional exhaustion.
We want to leave you with an immediate, actionable step. Don't just listen to this and move on. Today, we challenge you to sit down and write out your exact current savings rate.
The most important number.
What is the precise mathematical percentage of your gross income that is actively being saved or invested for your long-term independence? If you do not know that number, finding it out is your immediate, non-negotiable priority for this week.
That single metric, that one ratio, will tell you more about your actual financial trajectory than any other data point in your life.
If you found this structural framework valuable, please take a brief moment to rate the show, and more importantly, share this deep dive with a colleague who might benefit from taking a hard look at their own financial infrastructure.
The more we normalize these honest financial conversations within the hospital corridors, the healthier and more resilient our colleagues will be.
I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to ponder as you head into your next clinic or theater list. Think back to that cardiovascular analogy we used earlier, the quiet occlusion versus the secure airway.
Right.
If your financial constraints were entirely lifted tomorrow morning, if the student debt vanished and the retirement accounts were fully funded, how would your day-to-day clinical practice change?
That's a powerful question.
Would you drop a session? Would you stop doing private work? Would you spend more time with patients? And if your answer is drastically, what does that tell you about the absolute urgency of fixing your financial infrastructure today?